Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today delighted once again to be joined by Lawrence Connolly and Natasha Meikle for another Axon Bulletin. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good, thank you.
It's always a pleasure on a Tuesday. Obviously, I was sitting in yesterday for Kevin Graham, so 2 in a row, 2 on the bounce today. And again, the Celtic managerial merry-go-round is going to be discussed because more and more names, it seems on a daily basis, are getting thrown into that. We've also got an interesting thing yesterday happened. I don't know if you had a chance to listen, but we had John Traynor on, John being a poet and author, and he told a wee story about the fact that Dominic Mackay phoned him at home for a wee chat, phoned him at home because John is doing some work with the foundation, and I thought that was definitely a step in the right direction. Natasha, we've been quite critical about the lack of engagement from the club, so is this a kind of sign of things to come, do you think?
It's good, isn't it? Well, it certainly looks like it's a step in the right direction. I mean, technically, I suppose Dominic's not even started yet, and this is already on his radar and he's taken an interest. So I thought it was a really interesting discussion yesterday. I really liked hearing about that. And by all accounts, one of the things that is important to Dominic Mackay is fan engagement. And apparently that was apparent through his time with Scottish Rugby. And it's certainly something I hope he brings with him to Celtic. One thing we have battered on about all season, quite rightly to be fair, is the lack of engagement from the club. We're all too often left in the dark and find out our Celtic news from inappropriate sources, and that's before we get on to Laxalt slip up. But yeah, so I think that if we are going to start getting that level of engagement and is going to take a keen personal interest in advancing that, then that's certainly a positive sign for me. So that was great to hear. I liked that story yesterday. Really good listen.
It was good. I mean, it came out of the blue, and I think it shows a bit of humility in so far as there's someone at the kind of highest echelons of Celtic, or going to be, taking the time out just to touch base with a Celtic supporter. And I was thinking to myself, how many messages on Twitter or Facebook or even emails have I not got around to responding to in the last couple of weeks? Yet the new CEO is taking the time out, which I think is brilliant. So, Lawrence, as Natasha says, we've been very critical, highly critical of the lack of engagement. Now, some of the more kind of cynical views that I was getting on Twitter is, these kind of stories can be strategically dropped so that Celtic fans think that things are changing. I do get a sense that kind of change is going to happen with Dominic Mackay coming in.
Hope so, but even if it's just strategically dropped, we weren't doing it before. There was nothing to drop strategically before, so at least it's an improvement. And if it's not perfect, it's an improvement, and it's moving towards what we want.
In regards to Natasha, you said that he's not yet in office. I was just double checking. His contract at the SRU isn't up until July, the 1st of July. So Dermot Desmond's already revealed that he's going to be part of the new management recruitment coming in as well. So it's obvious that he is having a dual purpose at the moment with the SRU and with Celtic.
Yeah, and that's great to see that he's getting involved at an early stage. It should be people like him who are, looking to take the club forward now. I know there's been some criticism that Peter Lawwell is still involved in the managerial search, but it certainly makes sense that Mackay is. And I hope he's also having an oversight of, the dealings of the club. There's plenty going on at the moment. It looks like, we're interested in players, we're signing players, we're scouting players, we're looking at a new management setup. It makes more sense for Mackay to be involved in that than it does Lawwell. I get that Lawwell's experience means, rightly or wrongly, that they're going to draw on him. But I like that Mackay's involved already.
There is some static happening at the moment. Thanks for your comments. We will be working on trying to resolve that as well. I don't think it is, Lawrence, you're getting a bit of stick saying that you're talking with your head underwater. But we'll see if we can sort that out as we go through the big topics surrounding Celtic. Now, yesterday there was a suggestion that we talk far too much about Chris Ayer on this show. I don't think we do, actually. I was having a look at the topics over the last few weeks, and we only really ran with Ayer twice in the last 3 weeks. But as I was saying to Lawrence before we came on live, we're facing a situation in the summer where we're losing potentially 4 heads of department, if you want to look at it from a kind of corporate sense. And there is a wee bit of static. I'm just going to ask Natasha to look at her earphones or the volume, because it seems to have disappeared now, Lawrence. So in that kind of in relation to that corporate sense, you're losing 4 big department heads, because Nicky Hammond's on his way as well. That's why I was saying about Ayer. We need to try and keep as many leaders in the pack as we possibly can. But it was only a 2 or 3 minute discussion on Chris Ayer. The big story for me today is a number of managers are now throwing their hats in the ring. A couple of interesting ones over the last couple of days. Thierry Henry, and it is complete luck that you're wearing a Republic Island top, Lawrence, as I'm talking about Henry, has mentioned on the Robbie Fowler podcast that it's a club that would interest him. He's got a huge amount of respect. He's keeping an eye on the developments in Scotland. Now, when it comes down to this managerial appointment and the importance of it at this particular time, I don't see Henry as being the kind of manager that we could be bringing in. I think that's profile over the actual fibre of the manager. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know what he done at Montreal, but I think any manager that's available, if they throw their hat in the ring, they get their name mentioned and out there. I think maybe he's just saying it to get his name out there and let clubs know he's available. I think it'd be the wrong move for us.
What you said there, talking about tactics, throwing a suggestion out there, Lawrence, and seeing how that works as a wee grenade. Kevin Graham the other day spoke about that in relation to the Celtic boardroom and how there may well be leaked information about Roy Keane because certain members of the board don't want it to happen. I'm pretty sure that happens all the time.
Yeah, but I think Jock Stein used to plant stories as well. I think people will plant stories and test the water. I think we might have been in a better place if we'd done it more often recently, rather than just pushing things through and then seeing how fans reacted to it.
Yeah, you're right, because the question would always be, you've got to be on your guard as a Celtic show, Celtic broadcast, if you're getting information that you're not basically just being played. So you've always got to try and weigh that up. But it would appear, obviously, that the Roy Keane stories are true. We are in discussions with them. And the big thing that I would take from that, though, before we get onto the subject of Lucien Favre, and I hope I've pronounced that correctly, is that we are going through the correct process, the correct recruitment process, because again, as Celtic fans, Lawrence, we were hugely critical of the process last time round, weren't we? Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if you believe that it really was appointed in the shower and they didn't look at the other CVs, but I think communication-wise to the fans to announce it like that, or even pretend we've done it that way, I don't think it treats Celtic with respect, or the fans with respect, saying, we just appointed in the showers, we didn't look at any other CVs. I think that was disrespectful to Celtic and the fans.
It was, and it showed a wee bit of complacency. There was a real bloated attitude there whereby you're lording it over everybody, fans included. I agree with that, Lawrence, and you're saying, we just offered them it in the shower, and I don't actually think that took place. I mean, we'll never know. We don't have that view behind the curtain, as it were. But Zinko Vix, who comes in regularly, so welcome back to the show. You're commenting on YouTube. Henry, really, what is this? Well, what happened, Zinco, is that he was talking on the Robbie Fowler podcast. The Fowler podcast is a fairly new one, but it's very popular. It's always hanging around the top 5 in the UK iTunes chart. So he's obviously using his pulling power to get in the big hitters and the big name guests. And he was talking about Henry, and Henry was very respectful around Celtic. But as you say, Lawrence, it could well be one of these ones where you're putting your name out there so that it then becomes relevant again in relation to managerial appointments. Before you know it, you'll be appearing on the bookies odds checker, and then you start getting spoken about in the realms of managerial vacancies. So I think it probably would have been a tactical one. Would the French connection have worked with some of the French players or the French speaking players that have already left? Who knows? I just don't think that Henry, for me, would be the manager that we are looking for. Now, one, as I say, that does interest me, especially with the structure. When you look at the structure that Celtic are looking to implement, it would seem, Lawrence, where we're waiting for the director of football to be announced first and foremost, and I think everyone is expecting that to be Fergal Harkin. Once he's in place, we'll then start seeing how the head coach and his team will start to materialise. And this is where I feel that Favre's an interesting name, because you look at his pedigree. As a manager, some of the clubs that he's managed, some of the successes that he had at Borussia Dortmund, for example, the performances in the Champions League, for example, Lawrence, the fact that his average points per game is extremely impressive for Dortmund, and it's even higher than what Jurgen Klopp's was when he was at the club. And he seems to work under a similar structure. He seems to work well under a similar structure as a head coach. Is that the kind of name that would get your interest? Is that someone that Celtic should be looking at?
Maybe not so much the name would get my interest, but his track record would, and what he's achieved in the games. So I think when his name came up, didn't know too much about him. Then you go and read on his track record, you say points per game, what he's achieved. I think he's definitely a lot more interesting than Thierry Henry. I think he's someone that the club should be speaking to if he is genuinely interested.
Well, he has made it known that he's interested. That's obviously appeared in the press this morning, and it's one of the ones where you look at the kind of stature of the man, what he's done, like you say, Lawrence, and it would be foolish. I think it would be remiss to ignore that. You've got to get him in. You've got to have that discussion. It goes back to some of the points that Anthony and Jim make fairly regularly on a Friday on the Bulletin, whereby you just set your sights at the very highest, and then you might get a couple of knockbacks. You then start working your way down. Now, Natasha has been part of the Bulletin today. There was a few technical issues, a wee bit of static, so we're hoping to get Natasha coming back in at some point. But thanks for alerting us on the comment section. We will be bringing in as many comments as we possibly can today, because it's all about the fact that you need to come in, get involved, and tell us your thoughts on all things Celtic. Roddy 5. We started on this pod with names like Benitez, Howe, Martinez and Rangnick, and now here we are with names like Keane, Henry and Clark. Given our finances, unfortunately, this is a more realistic level. Now, yeah, you're right. We have gone right through the full plethora, I think, of managers, Lawrence. If you're connected or linked to the Celtic job, we will have a chat about it, and we'll ask the various contributors and, of course, the commenters what their thoughts are. I mean, running through some of these names, people said Benitez was a pipe dream. Was he not in the frame last time round? There's a suggestion that he was. We're going to try and bring Natasha back into the equation again, back into the Bulletin, Natasha. There does still seem to be a bit of static coming out of your laptop at the moment, unfortunately, so we will try again. But Benitez, again, the one thing with that, Lawrence, is you've got to ask yourself, the calibre manager is there. You look at the European success that he's had, that's there, so he's ticking these boxes. But is he the type of manager, and this might sound a bit bizarre, is he really the type of manager Celtic need for this rebuild? Because it's not just the type of manager who is all about the 11 players on the park. I think it's wider than that, it's bigger than that, isn't it, for Celtic at this time?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've all touched on, we need somebody that can get that bridge between the youths and the first team and get players first team ready. I think every manager's going to come with his demands on a transfer kitty and what he wants to achieve. So the board, I think Benitez is just my impression that he'd want a bigger transfer budget than Howard Martinez, for instance. I seem to get the impression that he's been operating at that level for quite a while. Would he want to step back down where he's not able to spend that kind of money? So I think the board's maybe get a lot to consider. It's not just the manager, it's his backroom team and what he wants in terms of a budget to spend.
No, you're right. I always look at a manager like Benitez, who's already said that his priority is England. That's his priority in relation to a return to football management. But I always look at a manager like Benitez and I think, well, he's only going to go to a club if there's a possibility that club can make an impression in Europe. When you look at Celtic, yeah, it's huge. It's absolutely massive for Celtic. And obviously winning the league next season is as important as ever. When you look at the financial bounty that could be in place the following season in the Champions League, Lawrence, going into the group stages, there is a caveat to that, obviously. If the winners of the Champions League this season don't qualify through their league campaign the following season, so it's a 99% chance that you are going to qualify as Scottish champions straight to the group stages. So when a manager like Benitez looks at a club like Celtic, as you say there, the transfer kitty is going to be huge. It's going to be a massive priority on the list of wants and the desirable list for someone like Benitez. I don't think that's where we are as a club. I don't think that we want to be, throwing tens of millions of pounds trying to make that dent, because you look at, the margins of becoming a club who, gets into the group stages, Lawrence, to become a club who then starts getting into the knockout. And if you were to look at the clubs who go out at the 32 stage, the 16 stage, etc., and the spend, it's astronomical, the difference between a club that goes out at the group stages. You're talking, it could be a difference of 80, 100, 150 million pounds. Celtic are nowhere near the realms of that kind of budget.
No, definitely not. I think we've got a number of players moving on. I think that's going to give us potential to have a decent budget. I think the wage bill is going to be down dramatically. We've got a lot of our top earners leaving. So, it's another big factor when we bring players in, where they come in on the wage bill. So I think, I could see us having 30 million to spend in the transfer market, but would that be enough for Benitez? That's maybe one player for him or half a player. Whereas some of the other managers, they would, like Favre, that might be 5 players for him, and that might suit our needs better.
Yeah, that's the concern, Natasha. I can say that it sounds much, much better, and you've also relegated Lawrence to the bottom of the screen as well. So welcome back to the Bulletin.
I'm glad it's clearer. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Listen, that's the risk you take during the lockdown, isn't it, really? Now, Roddy made a great point when you were away there, Natasha, in relation to setting the kind of sights, setting the targets. And as a podcast, we have certainly spoken about just about every manager who has been linked to Celtic, and we're doing exactly the same today. But Roddy makes the point in relation to the kind of the level of manager that we were talking about. Now, that top level that is named there, Benitez, Howe, Martinez and Rangnick, in fairness though, I would say that Eddie Howe is still a viable option for Celtic, is he not? I mean, you mentioned the lack salt comments. I've seen a few things this morning around whether or not that's a fake or if it's been voice-overed. Who knows? Who's got time to do that? That's my biggest concern. But, Eddie Howe, is he still an option for Celtic?
I think so. I think he has to be. You get a couple of rumours that he's spotted in Glasgow, or you get, this leak of Laxalt saying he's meeting him tomorrow, and it just keeps the rumour mill going, really. They have to have spoken to him. It's as simple as that. I know we just brought the comment up on screen there about aiming high, and now we're starting to come back down a bit, and it's like the analogy you used on an earlier show, is that you start at the top of the tree and you ask the question, and if you have to drop down a few branches before someone says yes, then so be it. But I certainly hope we're asking the question of the people at the top of the tree. And I think Howe is a viable target. I accept, earlier when we were discussing people maybe like Ranić and Benitez and Martinez to a degree, I get that they were perhaps out with the reach of what we could do and who we could attract to the club. I don't think I put Howe in that bracket. I think we can make this a viable and attractive option to him. I know recently he's been linked with Newcastle, and I think my comments on that are probably similar to Ayer. If they really do see Newcastle as a better option than Celtic for any reason other than financially, then that concerns me. A club like Celtic should be able to be a more attractive option than a club like Newcastle. No disrespect to Newcastle, but if Howe is seriously considering Newcastle as a possible job that might come up in the summer and the one that might appeal to him, then we surely have to be in his considerations as well. I know the rumours are that he doesn't want to move too far from the south coast. But then what difference really is there between Newcastle and Glasgow if he's going to do that? So for me, Howe's still very much in the frame and very much someone I would like to see at the club.
That's the big thing, though, isn't it? With that level of club in England, and by the way, Newcastle, I've always admired their fan base. I certainly have admired that.
Absolutely.
They've been starved of success for a long, long time, and it's a club that I always look back fondly on in the 1990s, and what I would always describe as English football's Premiership heyday. I loved English football back then, and but if you go there, you might have a bigger bounty, you might have access to more expensive players and higher wages, but what really is your ambition? What is your ambition at a club like Newcastle? Because it's so difficult to get into the higher reaches of that league to then qualify for Europe. Even a cup competition would seem to be beyond a club like Newcastle. When was the last time they won a trophy? Someone's maybe going to throw a date at me here. Was it not like decades and decades ago that the last won a trophy? And what is your ambition if you go to a club like Newcastle? And because the managerial merry-go-round is such down there that you could get thrown off that, and then your stock diminishes rapidly in English football as well. Next thing you know, you're trying to get a job in a championship. So, I'm not giving them any career advice, but in relation to Celtic, with regards to that European carrot, you would hope that we are still, an attractive proposition for someone like Eddie Howe. Do you think, Lawrence, I know rumours apart, do you think he is someone that we are seriously looking at and considering for this vacancy?
Yeah, I think definitely somebody that we're looking at. The rumours are that the board's split. We don't have a favourite yet, but he ticks a lot of the boxes, doesn't he? But as you say, if he goes to Newcastle, it's financial. I suppose maybe he sees it as a higher profile position for him, and that if he does well at Newcastle, he might get someone else in the Premier League. But for me, I'm not too sure Howe's the man. After reading about Lucien Favre after he threw his hat in the ring, I think, well, actually, you might be a bit more interesting. Where are we going to be shopping? I think we're still going to be looking for bargains. There's not too many to be had in England, which is where Howe's knowledge is going to mostly come from. There might be more in Germany for us. So, yeah, I think Howe's under consideration, but how much would it cost? How much would they want to spend? And how does his record hold up compared to Lucien's? I would think Lucien's was stronger.
The other names mentioned on the previous post there, I think would be classed generally as a downgrade on the previous mentioned names. So Roy Keane was part of that list. Stevie Clark, obviously, we're watching Scotland over the next few days as well. They haven't gone down that well, though, Natasha. And John Francis comes in to say Desmond seems to like the Irish manager. I think he'll continue with this. He's a one-trick pony, and I'm getting sick of his narrow-minded view. I agree with John. I think we've said it, and we've had the discussion with Russell, who's obviously driving the Keno bus. That's not the bus I'm on. Interestingly enough, though, And I mentioned this yesterday. Sky Sports ran with the story with Keenan Butt. They ran with that story yesterday. And they returned to the story time and time again, and then seen the story appearing all over the national press. And you wonder what else, because surely they're not basing it on the kind of the rumour mill that obviously we're part of at times, I would guess, if we suggest that that's information we've got. Surely they've gone and checked, maybe at their correspondents at Manchester. Sky Sports could maybe just give Roy Keane a phone and ask him, no?
You think so? You'd think that these discussions are all sort of happening behind the scenes. Alan McCoist was in the media in the last few days as well, saying that he's spoken to Roy Keane about it, and whether he's managed to get any information out of him, who knows? But he says apparently not. And you'd like to think anyone going through an interview process, or anyone who is a candidate for a job, is keeping their cards close to their chest. If I was going through a recruitment process, I certainly wouldn't be talking about it too loudly. And if I was the employer hiring, I wouldn't want any potential candidates talking about it too loudly, which has always made me think that those who are throwing their hats into the ring, Favre, Henry, and then Keane to an extent as well. I always thought, the people talking most about it are the ones who haven't been contacted yet. And it's more of a come and talk to me rather than the club have approached them directly. So perhaps they aren't on the short list that have been talked to already. But for me, that brings around its own concerns. If you've got a manager like Favre there who's saying, come and talk to me, essentially, well, why haven't we already spoken to him? I think it was December he lost his job. So he's been someone who's on the market since then. Why is it taken until the end of March for his name to come up? He wouldn't be saying, it's a job I'm interested in, come and talk to me sort of vibes, if Celtic already had. Or maybe he would, who knows? But my view, or my feeling, is that anyone who's still trying to throw their name into the hat hasn't been spoken to already. And if not, why not? What stage of this process are we at that there's still new candidates seeming to pop up? Like Anthony Haggerty likes to go on about, there are only 80 days now, I think was his last countdown. Was it 80? So it might be slightly less than that now. Only 80 to 70, whatever it is, days until the start of the Champions League qualifiers. So, we are running out of time. And I feel like at the moment, every week we're coming on here discussing either the same names, if it's Howe or Keane or Martinez, Benitez, and then every week there's a new name thrown in. And this week it's Favre and Henry. Last week it was Marsh. So every week I feel like we're having similar discussions about who it's going to be, with just an addition of a new name on top. And I'd like to see us getting a little bit further down this application process or recruitment process and making some announcements sooner rather than later. But it doesn't sound like that's happening.
Well, on that point, Capello Mark comes in to say must be close to an appointment, think it's possibly timing when to announce. Well, again, we were speaking earlier about the various heads of department who will be leaving the club, and Nicky Hammond we would expect to be one of them. And obviously before Fergal Harkins announced, you would expect Nicky Hammond to move on. So it will be a case of timing, and then you start seeing the order of events coming through. Obviously we've got the CEO already, then the director of football, then perhaps the head coach after that. One thing that I'm not keen on, and I'm going to come on to yourself, Lawrence, is this sideshow. I was surprised yesterday with some of the comments around the fact that Keane would be an exciting appointment and you would have the Keane versus Gerrard sideshow. I've never ever looked upon Celtic as being like a fashion accessory, something that, it's all about box office. That doesn't interest me in the slightest. It might interest broadcasters down south. They might see that as kind of a box office draw, but as a Celtic supporter, it's not something I'm interested in.
No, I agree with you. From a Celtic point of view, I don't see it as Keane Gerrard. Nobody's bigger than the club. Well, it may be true across the city, someone's bigger than the club, but for Celtic, I don't think the head coach or manager's ever going to be bigger than the club. Media contracts down south, Celtic may have an eye on that. Netherlands, Belgium, if that merger goes through, we make it easier for Celtic to move. So perhaps they've got an eye on having someone like Keane would be a figurehead and would make perhaps smooth negotiations with the broadcasters. And let's be honest, they call the shots down south. So maybe that. But from my point of view, and I think any Celtic fans' point of view, the manager's not bigger than the club.
No, it simply can't be. And you also can't look at profile over the actual nuts and bolts of results and what they're going to bring to the club. We've been going on about how much of a rebuild it is, and some people were asking yesterday why we keep going on about Ajer. Well, you consider what Celtic's defence is going to be in that game in 80 days, Natasha, and we probably should have a Haggerty countdown clock on the bulletin. But once all the loanees go back, if we do lose Ajer, our defence is going to be made up of Tony Ralston, Greg Taylor, Stephen Welsh, and potentially Jack Hendry should he come back. If he doesn't, we don't even really have another centre half. Julian is out until September, October. Beaton looks as though he's on his way out as well. And so that's why I'm looking at someone like Ajer, because it gives you the stability. And I take on board the fact that, moving into, I think, his last year, it's all about trying to get the best deal for Celtic. Then, I have seen it in the past where you get an improved last year so that you sign an extension, then the club are able to cash in on you at a later date. I would see this as something of a priority, but I was told yesterday stop speaking about Chris Ajer. But again, for me though, we have a real dearth of leaders at the club, Natasha. We've got a real lack of, for me, candidates for the captaincy. And I know that Brendan Rodgers said that Callum McGregor's a shoo-in. He's a natural successor. What's your thoughts on whether or not we should push the boat out to try and keep Chris Ajer? And of course, the managerial announcement, will that make any difference to Chris Ajer's decision?
I've said it plenty times on here on my Twitter page. I'd love to keep Chris Ajer. I think it would be an excellent choice to keep him in and make him captain. I think he's got those qualities that we look for, the leadership, that drive, that passion. And for as much as I like McGregor, I don't see him with those qualities as much. I know that Roger said that McGregor's a shoo-in for it, and to be honest, I think that's only the case because McGregor is the only option. If you look around that squad and who we have left, there aren't many alternatives other than Ajer. So I think it will end up being McGregor. And I'm just not sure that's the right choice. I'm not sure he's the right character, and I'm not sure if it suits him to be captain. Perhaps whoever the new head coach or manager that comes in will have their own idea about perhaps a player on their radar who they could bring in to be a captain. But usually the club like to stick with a bit of stability in that department. McGregor's clearly been lined up for this. He's been vice captain for the last couple of years under Brown. He has been wheeled out in front of the media to do all the interviews. It looks very much that he's lined up for the role. Whether it's the right one, I'm not sure. I think what we'll miss with Brown is having that leadership on the park. And essentially, I've mentioned it before, having like another coach on the park. You see it a lot in the games, Brown really driving and talking the squad through the game. And I don't see that as much from McGregor. I think I do see it more from Ajer. I have to agree with some of the comments coming in. I think we would be lucky to keep Ajer. As much as it pains me to admit it, I think he will be looking to his next move. And whether a new manager can affect that, I'm not so sure. Perhaps if we did go for someone who Ajer thought could develop him as a player and secure his next move, then maybe, for Ajer, his thoughts have to be, what's the best move for me now that can, progress my career? Is it another year at Celtic and get, a bigger league? Or is it move now to, a club like Newcastle and then move on further from there? What Celtic need to be doing is making it attractive an option to Ajer and convincing the best option is another year here, another year of development, and going straight to that bigger move rather than Newcastle then on again.
Yeah, the big concern for me is the fees that we're now talking about. You think back to the AC Milan connection and a link to Milan, and you compare that to Newcastle United interested at £8 million. That would concern me because I think he is one of our biggest assets. Interestingly enough, today, in a rare interview, Mark Viduka was speaking about his career down south, and the way that he was talking about it was very much like Celtic were just the stepping stone to get him down to the English league. So it's not a new thing, and I think we've all kind of learned that is and accepted that is the case for a lot of these players. But what was interesting, I don't think I've had a chance, Natasha, to get your view on Scott Brown, our illustrious leader, leaving Celtic and lining up for Aberdeen next season. But interestingly enough, Man City announced today that Aguero's going to be leaving, and they're going to erect a statue of him outside the stadium. Now, if they're going to erect a statue of Aguero, surely Bruni doing the Bruni would look good on the Celtic way.
Oh, I think it would look excellent. I think there's maybe a few people lined up for statues before Brown, but I'm sure one day nobody would be against that happening. He really is one of the all-time greats in history. I look fondly on him as such. It's every time I think about it, I get more frustrated at the thought of seeing him in a red shirt. I don't get it, to be honest. I do get why he's leaving, and I did anticipate that there's a possibility at the end of the season that he would go. I just thought that there might be a role for him here in some sort of coaching capacity. Obviously his playing time might have been more limited, but Celtic have a bit of a record of liking to keep hold of their old captains. You just have to look at Stephen McManus still being around, Neil Lennon being around for so long. Celtic do manage to find roles for these type of player, and I thought Brown could have been one of them. For him, perhaps it's a personal choice that he wants to continue his playing career rather than looking for his playing time to take a back seat while he focuses on a coaching role at Celtic, and maybe he thinks he'll get more game time at Aberdeen. For me, I thought personally that Brown might like to go out on more of a high than lining up for Aberdeen over the next couple of seasons as they go for 4th or 5th in the league, as his playing days ebb away from him. That's not really the route I saw him going down. I would have perhaps understood more if he'd wanted to continue his playing career going somewhere like Australia or trying that sort of league. So I was surprised at his decision to go to another Scottish club, and it'll certainly feel strange when we see him line up there next season.
It definitely will. There's been a few suggestions, Lawrence, that Lee Griffis might be following him to Pittodrie. Is Lee Griffis' Celtic career over? Do you think that he's had his final chance? He's had more than many in terms of chances, and it doesn't look as though for me he's ever going to recapture the form of old. I mean, we talk about the 40 goal season, that was 5 years ago now. Do you think he might end up at a fellow Scottish club like Aberdeen? Yeah,
it could do if they pay enough money for him. But very much like Natasha's feeling about Brown, I don't really want to be lining up against Lee Griffis. He's still got the ability to put the ball in the back of the net. But someone touching on Natasha's earlier point, she hopes that the decision's been made in the manager, and it's all about controlling the news. Somebody's making football decisions at Celtic just now, pretty important ones. We're signing players, we're letting players go out on loan. We're not keeping Brown. There's now rumours that Griffiths may be going. So it could be a bit of news management. And if a new manager was coming in, certainly putting players out on loan is something that you'd want to do. See them being tested so as you can get the videos of them and be ahead of the game before he steps in. As you said, Tony's TikTok clock is minus 80 to the champions, isn't it? So, yeah, I think probably the appointment has been made and someone's making these decisions. Griff, I would probably keep, because goal scorers are the hardest thing to find. We've got Griff, Ayeti, Klimala. I think everybody accepts Edwards off. So if we let Griff go, you're looking to sign another 2 strikers. It's not going to be cheap.
It's one of the things, Natasha. It's a player who wouldn't have been a first choice all season, certainly, for many Celtic fans, but I certainly don't want to see Celtic lining up against them next season. Lee Griffis.
I mean, that's the thing. I'd mentioned before on here, I think it might be time for Griffis to be moved on at the club. I have been disappointed in him this season. Obviously he's had his issues in the past, and he's had all of our full support and respect for overcoming and battling that, but this season I've been disappointed in his professionalism. He didn't even go on our pre-season tour because he turned up unfit, and he's never been fit since. And I feel like that's cost us this season. Had we been able to rely on that effective partnership of him and Edward that was so great at the end of last season, this season could have turned out slightly differently for us. So I have been disappointed with Griffiths, and I am frustrated in him. And I would fully understand if they decided that this is the season for him to move on. But like Lawrence has said, there's a difference between thinking about him moving on from my club and seeing him line up against us for someone else. And when you put it like that, do you want a striker like Lee Griffiths lining up against you? And the answer is no. but only if he is able to get himself fully fit and functioning for another team. If he does, then it could be one of these situations where you think you've then shot yourself in the foot by letting him go. So it's frustrating because we've not been able to get him, or he's not been able to get himself to full fitness this season. But the last thing you want is for him to get a great pre-season under his belt with Aberdeen and come back and haunt us. So it is a tough call on Griffis, but the important question, like Lawrence has touched on, is who's making this call? Whose decision is it to whether or not to keep Griffis around? Goal scorers are hard to find. Ayeti and Klimala haven't really hit the mark, and look at how much they've cost us. So replacing not only one but two, perhaps three strikers is going to be expensive, and we need to find them, and we need to find them fast, and I don't know where we do that, but I certainly hope that the club do.
Yeah, and you need to bed them in, of course. I mean, you look at the upheaval of bringing in 6 new players this season, Natasha, we could be bringing in double that with loads more leaving. And just when you were talking about Griffiths, I was thinking back to the last game we were all at, where he scores a hat-trick against St Mirren last March, over a calendar year ago. And it was always going to be strange going back after the pandemic, once things get back to a level of normality that allow us to go to stadiums. But it is going to feel as though we've been in a coma. We're going to go back to Celtic Park, right? The new manager's going to be in place. We're going to be facing an aging Scott Brown for Aberdeen. It's going to be absurd. It's just going to be very, very unusual in any case. But when you look at the level of the changes that Celtic are going to undertake over the next few months, it's going to be a strange one when we go back to Celtic Park and see it all in the flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, by the time we get back, it'll feel as about 5 years have passed, because we're trying to do probably 3, 4, 5 years worth of changes in the next 60, 70 days. And that's a monumental task to take on, and it's a bit frustrating that the club's lack of foresight has got us to this position. You have to be looking further down the line. You have to have some sort of succession planning that doesn't involve everything falling off a cliff at the end of one season, and you needing a new manager, a new CEO, a new captain, 10 new players all at the same time. And, if you look a year or so back, the warning signs were there that this was going to happen. And I really wish we'd been a lot more prepared for this than we are, because the amount of change that is needed over the short period of time that we've got is monumental. And the thing is, the club don't have time for any sort of bedding in period like we need and like we've talked about. We need to hit the ground running next season, not just for the Champions League qualifiers, which are important, but the actual start of the season as well. We can't have them sort of having a bedding in period at the start of the league campaign. We need to hit the ground running. We need to get the points on the board. The longer we take to bed in or give players time, or if it doesn't come together instantly, the momentum starts moving further in the wrong direction, and it's harder and harder to get back. So the timing now is starting to give me a bit of concern.
No, it is. And these are the things we've been talking about during the season, and we were told we were overreacting, but it's quite clear we've seen this coming. We actually seen it coming. Despite what Dermot Desmond is saying in his last communication with Celtic fans, a lot of people did see it coming. It's not as though we're looking at it with hindsight saying, I told you so. We spoke about it in real time all the way through the season. There was an excellent point came up there on the subject of Eddie Howe, and it came down to the fact that, his wife and kids, he won't want to move them up to Scotland. Now, I take that point actually, because with Rangers, they've got Stevie Gerrard, who's up here on his own. He's left his wife and kids down south, and I always feel as though there's it's almost as if a temporary stepping stone. And we always knew that Brendan Rodgers would eventually move on if things went well, which they did. But you want them to be all in, and I just never feel personally that the manager's all in unless he moves lock stock up to Scotland and obviously probably in and around the Glasgow area. And you get the feeling from Steven Gerrard certainly that that's a temporary measure and he will move on because his stock's high at some point. You don't really want the then coming Celtic manager, Lawrence, I'll ask you first, to have that kind of temporary vibe about it, do you?
No, I mean, I think John Barnes touched on it in his interview with you. When he came up, he was going to move his partner up, and then a couple of things happened and he thought, wait a minute, this is temporary, I'm not moving my partner up. So I think it is completely the wrong vibe. If he's come up here to run the first team, as the coach, or if he's come up as the manager to run the football side of operations, you're wanting someone that's fully committed. What does it say to players? If the manager's not fully committed, if you've got a player that's not sure about staying, for example, Chris Ayer, and he gets a manager that comes in and said, well, I'm not leaving my family here because I'm only going to be here 2 or 3 years. I think it's definitely the wrong message. I think we need someone in that's going to be all in, so to speak.
Absolutely, all in. You mentioned John Barnes there. I got a wee shiver down my spine thinking back to that interview, Lawrence. I've not listened to it in some time. We should bring John Barnes back onto the Bulletin one of these days. He's always an interesting chat, that's for sure. Mark, who comes onto the Bulletin on a regular occasion. Mark, welcome back. You're talking to us on YouTube. Anyone be happy with Laxalt being used as a make weight in a deal for either Ayer or Eduard? I don't know. I mean, I think we've all said it, Natasha. We've seen him. He came in, he made an impact, faded away, comes back in. Thought he played pretty well against Rangers, I've got to say. But some of the figures quoted around his value, I find quite surprising from what we've seen anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the sort of figures that were being quoted that we'd have to pay for him, I think surely that there must be an alternative left-back option for that kind of price. But in saying that, we weren't able to find one. So maybe that really is what that sort of money buys you right now. I do see glimpses of that talent from Laxalt. Like you say, when he first came in, I thought, we've got a player here. He looks like he could really fit into the squad, and he looks like he could be a real asset. Then in his performance, he sort of fell off a cliff, and he started to, turn into a bit of a headless chicken. He was never in position. He was all over the place. He rarely hit the byline, and you thought, how was this guy being signed by AC Milan? And then he sort of recovered a little bit of form again, and you do have to question whether he could recover that further under a better management setup, better coaching perhaps, whether we could make him into that sort of player that he looked like when he first came in. I wouldn't write Laxalt off completely. If the money was right, then he'd certainly be an option for me. But I wouldn't like to see us, putting Ayer out the door to try and keep Laxalt. That's a very clear downgrade if we end up giving them Ayer and we get to keep Laxalt, with some money going in that direction as well. But yeah, unless, you're telling me that there's another left back being lined up for a better value who's going to come in and do significantly better than Taylor or Laxalt, then I think Laxalt does certainly have to remain in the considerations. But we shall see. Who's making these decisions at the moment? We don't know. Exactly.
I think when I look at it, rather than going through the process of scouting someone else, Natasha, we might be in a situation where, you look at the El Yunusi deal where we retain him for another year. It would be good to see someone like Laxalt and John Joe Kenny to a lesser degree getting a full pre-season at Celtic, with a new manager, with a new approach, because otherwise we are looking for two new fullbacks. Lawrence, would you buy into that if we could maybe retain him on loan for another campaign, or would you be looking for a fresh right back and a fresh left back?
I think there's definitely a player in there. He was in the World Cup Team of the Year, last World Cup. As Natasha said, with a new manager, get a better tune out of him. Playing with different centre-halves or someone in left midfield in front of him that's different, would that help improve him? Mm-hmm. He's one of the better players against Safeco. So, yeah, the thing that worry me is the wages that maybe come in wanting, how that's going to balance it, and how much make weight is it going to be. If they're going to price him at $2 million, you're saying, well, yeah, it's probably worth taking it. If they're saying he's an $8 million make weight, you're thinking, can Celtic afford to spend $8 million on a left back? Potentially, when we could be looking at bringing 2 strikers in, where that's kind of where our limit's been on a player before, roughly, or just north of there, isn't it? So, yeah, for a left back, it would be pricey. But then again, we're talking about continuity within the squad with a lot of players moving on. So, yeah, it could be another loan deal that I'm not the biggest fan of. At right back, if we can get a couple of decent centre halves in and keep Ayer, we can play Ayer at right back.
You've been saying that for some time, and I did, think that he played pretty well. He was quite impressive at right back, Lawrence, absolutely no doubt about it. CFC 1967 comes in. Sorry, but putting your wits against Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea and Arsenal is far more appealing than managing Celtic at Hamilton, Ross County and Livingston. And I think that is the challenge you face when you're looking for a new manager. There are obviously other reasons why someone would want to come to Celtic, but there are pros and cons, and sometimes it's the timing element as well, and that was what was key with Brendan Rodgers. It was the right time, it was the right fit for him, just as he was the right fit for us as well. So we're talking about fullbacks, and I was interested to read as well, talking about Arsenal and other English clubs, that Kieran Tierney is on the radar of a number of clubs, and Man City have actually been mentioned as well. And you think, I remember when he went down to Arsenal and asked Kevin the question, is this Kieran Tierney's level? Can he actually progress further? That was a big debate that day. And I think, although he might say I'm a liar tonight when he's back on and screaming Celica, I think Kevin said no, this is Tierney's level. But with his performances at Arsenal this season, and I think he's a standout every time I see him for Scotland as well, I think he could take that step up, Natasha. And if he did, what kind of fee are we talking if a Man City was to come in just now for Kieran Tierney?
Oh, it'd have to be massive. Look what sort of money's going around for players like John Stones. So you're not going to get Tierney for much or anything less than that, in my opinion. He's, one of the, if not the best left back in that league. And I think he's just an absolute prime example of what happens when you've got a talented player who is 110% committed to every game and every training session they play. And he has to be seen as a role model and that, example. So, to be honest, I don't think Arsenal's his limit. I think he can certainly go higher. Every time I watch Arsenal play, Tierney stands out. In terms of the drive, passion, commitment and ability. He is head and shoulders above a lot of players he plays with in that team and a lot of players he comes up against. So when you're talking about him being one of the best players in that Arsenal squad, then why can't he go higher than that? He'd have to choose his next move carefully, I think. Doesn't want to move too much or too quickly and, maybe hamper his development. He talks very highly of Arteta and the coaching that he's receiving there. But I certainly think Tierney can go a step further than Arsenal. And in terms of the funds we're talking about, you'd have to assume it would be tens and tens of millions. And again, that's, testament to the model that we have of producing our own players and selling them for a higher fee. But what did Tierney go for? 20, 25 million? A couple of years down the line, that's still looking like robbery when he's going to go for double that. So I think, again, with that in mind, and when we're looking at players going out the door, perhaps like Ayer, let's not sell ourselves short and let's not settle for a lower value just because, they've come from our league. You just have to look at players like Tierney and what their value could be going on. Similarly to what happened with Van Dijk. So I hope we don't settle for too low a sum for players like these if we are going to look to move them out the door and recoup some money.
Talking about recouping money, hopefully Peter Lawwell's leaving us a wee parting gift with a sell-on fee. If Tierney does go, it'd be nice to get 15% of that, Lawrence. And when we're talking about the English game, because obviously some of our players are being linked to the likes of Newcastle, we've got a couple of comments coming in. Zinko comes back in to say Newcastle should be doing a lot better than what they are doing. Massive fan base and serious following. I've always been impressed. I think when I look down to the English game, and I've said on here a few times, I'm not a massive fan these days of English football, but I have been to a lot of games over the years. I've never been to a stadium more often than St James's Park. That seems to be the stadium I've been to because it's so easy, where I live, just to jump on a train. And a group of us have gone down quite a few times down to Newcastle, and I like the whole vibe of the place on match day. So I would agree with Zinko. I think the fan base actually deserve a lot better than what they've had over the last few decades, and that's incredible when you think about a club who doesn't win a trophy for several decades, and you look at the level of success that Celtic are looking at. So yeah, and the big thing for me as well is once a club like Newcastle, if they were to drop out of the division, they just need to look at Leeds to see how difficult it is, for almost like a generation that you're out the top league and it's very, very difficult to get back in as well. And I think that is the kind of thing that the likes of Chris Ayer needs to be aware of. You could be going to a basket case of a club that could be fighting relegation, and then you're more or less, thrown to the wolves after that. You don't know what's going to happen after that. Your stock then drops, and I think he's got to be very careful at this stage of his career, Chris Ayer. And like you say, Natasha, I think Kieran Tierney does as well. But I've always believed he could take that step up. Within the English game, it's just it's the fees. It's just the astronomical fees if you go from an English club to another English club. And if he was to do that, I'm pretty sure we'll get a few quid, and we might be able to buy a left back ourselves if Tierney was to move again, because we've tried a few times to replace him unsuccessfully. If you know the history, thanks for getting involved. I back Glasgow Celtic Football Club regardless of who the manager is. Absolutely agree with that. And we can discuss and debate who the right man is for the job, and I think a lot of people are aware of who your choice would be, Natasha, on mine, and those that were against. But if we were to appoint Keane, we're still going to support the club, we're still going to back him. It's just that during this process, I don't think, and the timing as well, I don't think it's the right time to bring in someone like Roy Keane. Now, Lawrence, you'll think back to some of the managers you've watched as a Celtic fan, and you did back them regardless. You've seen some horrific Celtic teams in the past, and a lot of the managers weren't great, and I just think we need to be very, very very careful as to who we appoint. But the action is just round the corner. We've got a Scottish Cup game coming up this weekend, and we're facing Falkirk. Now, someone else actually came in to say Newcastle are the Hearts of England. Thank you, Danny boy. Are we going to have another Scottish Cup upset as Hearts have had already at Falkirk, or do you see this being easy enough in terms of a professional enough performance and we'll get through it?
Look, should I be going for 4-3 against Falkirk? I'm not too sure. I think we'll definitely get through it. I don't think it's going to be an easy game in the Cup, but yeah, I can see it's coming through 2 or 3-0. I'm not overly worried. I don't think they're going to pull off a broader against us.
I said easy, that was probably disrespectful, Natasha. What I meant to say was comfortable enough. If we turn up, if we put in a professional performance, you would expect us to win the game comfortably, surely.
Absolutely. You just have to look at the squads on paper, and although, if you look at our squad on paper, we should have won our own league comfortably this year. I think there probably is too big a gulf between the squad that we have and the squad that Falkirk have. So I do expect it to be a relatively comfortable game. But as we have seen with Celtic this season, I'm not sure you can ever say that. So we shall see.
Now, someone's coming in to tell us that Glenn Coe is coming in to say the last won a domestic trophy in 1956. Wow, that's just astonishing. And you still look at the stadium when you're allowed to go back to the games, and there's 50,000 Geordies in there supporting Newcastle, and they haven't won a domestic trophy since 1956. There's been a few false dawns for Newcastle. Now, an interesting conversation that we had with Colin at the weekend was around the fact that he was dead against Roy Keane. And then we went on to the subject of, giving someone a job because they've got a link to Celtic. And he brought up the example of Henrik Larsson, because at the beginning of the season, I was saying we should have brought in a striker coach. And because Larsson and Lennon played together, it could be giving Lenny some support as well, because we all knew he didn't assemble the coaching staff. And Colin was talking about how if a legend can come in and not do so well, it can kind of tar their legacy and their reputation. One of the biggest examples of that actually not happening was at Newcastle, because Alan Shearer was the manager, wasn't he? Did he not take them down? He got them relegated. So it can be done. You can still be a hero even if you come in and it doesn't go so well. I'm not saying for a minute, by the way, that Larsson should be Celtic's manager. But when Colin said that he would take anyone over Roy Keane, I says, would you take Henrik Larsson? And then, that gave him a bit of a dilemma. But I'm all about, it doesn't matter for me if they've got a link to Celtic. It doesn't matter if they're Irish. As long as the manager can do the job, the head coach can do their job, that's all I'm interested in, Natasha.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe it is time to move away from that, ex-Celt or Celtic Association type of manager, and try go down a different route. I'm with you. I don't think I'd like to see Henrik Larsson come back yet. Lennon, by all accounts, was a real Celtic great, a Celtic hero as well, and he has unfortunately seriously tarnished his reputation. Who knows, maybe, a few years down the line, maybe a bit longer, we'll look back on it and some of the hard feeling may have dissolved slightly. But Lennon will have to live with the fact that this season has seriously diminished all the significant work and the achievements he did have during his playing and managing career. And it's a shame. It is a shame that one season can do that. And maybe it will, like I say, diminish as history, looks back or as time moves on. But I would hate to see that happen to Larsson. I really would. I think if I was looking to bring a Larsson to the club at the moment, it's more likely to be his son than him, who is on fire for his own team at the moment, in Europe and at Spartak Moscow. Unfortunately, I think he's probably a little bit out of our reach at the moment, but never say never. If we are bringing a Larsson back, let's look at Jordan.
And jersey sales would go through the roof. Larsson 7 on the back, wouldn't they? In fact, you could probably afford it just with the merchandise sales, Natasha. Frank Brennan, welcome to the show, Frank. You're coming in via YouTube to say Martinez is viable and he would only want a proper wage rather than any kind of mega millions. The mentally fragile Howe is only interested in the low expectation and making up the numbers, Crystal Palace. Well, Martinez apparently hasn't been approached for the job and he wouldn't be interested in any case. I know we did speak about him earlier on in the season when Kevin Graham asked me who my dream appointment would be, and I did say Martinez and Maloney, but that isn't viable because we haven't asked the question. And why would he? Would be the question for me. Why would he leave the position that he has at the moment to come to Celtic in such a time of transition? So, these names, and we'll continue to cover any of the names that come up in terms of speculation with Celtic's managerial vacancy. But we are no further forward at the moment, and hopefully within the next week or so we will have a director of football in place. We've got a game to get through before then, and that's against Falkirk this weekend. We'll be covering the game here from a Celtic State of Mind. Thanks everybody for getting involved. If you haven't done so already, get subscribing on YouTube as we grow our subscriptions. We're putting out broadcasts every single day. All that's left for me to say, Natasha, thank you again, and thank you to Lawrence Connolly for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.